in this video, I'm going to show you how you can substitute the lax I vowel from American English with a tense but short vowel from your native language. And for most of my students, this vowel substitution ends up working perfectly in that the American ear ends up hearing the I sound when it's mixed into words within sentences in conversation. These are the vowels in American English separated into two groups, one group being tense vowels and the other group being lax vowels. And knowing the distinction between tense and lax vowels is incredibly important in English, especially in American English. And while there are a few different characteristics that define which vowels are tense and which vowels are lax, the most important characteristic for our purposes, which is learning to speak with the American accent, is the characteristic of length, the length of the vowel itself. In that our tense vowels are long in length and our lax vowels are short. But now it's important to note that in other languages, tense vowels are not necessarily long and lax vowels are not necessarily short. So a lot of languages, aside from English, have short tense vowels. And so in this video, I'm going to show you how you can substitute the lax I vowel from American English with a tense but short vowel from your native language, which is otherwise known as the cardinal vowel sound in the International Phonetic Alphabet. And for most of my students, this vowel substitution ends up working perfectly in that the American ear ends up hearing the I sound when it's mixed into words within sentences in conversations. And if it also ends up working for you, then it'll save you a lot of time, energy, and frustration in trying to keep this I sound from sounding like the E sound, which is obviously a classic problem for non-native speakers when speaking English. And it might not seem so difficult at first glance being able to make the I different from the E if you're just saying them like that, I, E, as standalone sounds. But once they're surrounded by other sounds on either side of them, which is the case in real life, it becomes a whole lot more difficult to keep the I from sounding like the E. But first, let's take a look at tense vowels and lax vowels, because like I said, this distinction is of the utmost importance in the American accent. So our tense vowel sounds are A, E, I, O, U, A, ow. And the lax vowel sounds, U, And so you probably noted a difference in length between the tense vowel sounds and the lax vowel sounds. With the tense vowels, we generally want to let them ride long. A, E, I. And while this can sometimes be an issue for non-natives, keeping the A, E, ah sounds long in length in the way that Americans do, keeping the lax vowels short in length tends to be a much, much bigger problem and has a much bigger impact on people's accents. And of course, tongue positioning, mechanics, these things make a difference in creating the right sound. But from my experience, length is one of the most important aspects when it comes to the lax vowels. And when they're not kept short, the I ends up sounding like the tense E, the E ends up sounding like the A, the ends up sounding like an U, and the ends up sounding like ah. So for example, the word sit would sound like seat, bet would sound like bat, book would sound like book, and fun would sound like fan. But the two that impact non-natives' accents the most are the I and the because they're the most common sounds in the English language of those four sounds. So I'll cover the otherwise known as the famous schwa sound in another video. But let's take a look at some of the reasons why non-natives continually end up saying E when they want to say I, in a real conversation, that is, even if they fully understand the tongue position and the mechanics of both sounds. So as we can see on this vowel chart, the E and I are both high front sounds, meaning the tongue for both of these sounds is high in the mouth and forward in the mouth. And of course, the it is less high than the E by a little bit. So, the vowels at the top of the chart there, those are the vowel sounds where the tongue is the highest in the mouth. And the middle back part of the tongue goes down significantly more, I would say, in the I than with the E. But compared to most other sounds we see on the chart, the I and the E have pretty similar, very similar tongue positionings. A second problem is simply just this symbol itself, which for English speakers like myself, we think of as an I. But in most other languages, people associate this symbol with an E sound. So just the fact that this E sound is in people's muscle memory, non-native speakers' muscle memory, when they see this symbol, or even when they just think of that symbol in their mind's eye, is actually a bit more problematic than you might think. And the third problem, and the one that most people don't think about, is the fact that most English consonants are made using a high tongue. So that even if your it sound is good, you might still end up getting an E sound inadvertently when transitioning from the it into a high consonant or a high forward consonant. Your tongue is essentially passing through the E sound when going from the I to one of those consonants. And while I do have a mechanical fix for that problem, the first thing I tend to try with students is the E. So substituting in the I sound for our I sound. And I do that because it's likely a sound that already exists in their native language. So for instance, in Russian, it's the reduced form of the Y sound. In Portuguese, they have the closed E sound. And these here are just some of the languages that have an E vowel sound. So on the vowel chart, note the proximity of the I and the E to each other. They're extremely close. And yeah, the E and the I are also very close to each other, but the E and the E are very different sounds. The E has a very different quality to it as when compared to the E. And they're both tense vowel sounds, but the E in most languages is either short or they have a short form of that vowel sound in their language, meaning short in length. So when I detect that a new student of mine has an issue with their I sound, then I'll ask them to substitute in their native I sound for the I. And if that sounds good within single words, then I'll have them try it within sentences, which works for most people. And even if it doesn't sound perfect within just a single word, I'll still have them try it within a sentence, because for some people it actually sounds much better and much more like an it to the American ear when within a sentence rather than just within a single word. So essentially, I'm having my students rethink the it sound entirely to associate it now with the e rather than with the e. And of course, they still have to get this into their muscle memory through practice, but their job is now cut basically in half in terms of time and energy that they would have spent on this constant I battle. So in a moment, we're going to try some sentences together using this substitution technique. But again, I can't stress enough how important the length of the vowel sound is when we're dealing with American lax vowel sounds. And even though we're substituting with a tense vowel sound, we want to keep it short. And honestly, this technique still kind of feels like magic to me. I get a new student, I ask them to substitute the e sound from their language and to keep it short. And to my American ear, time and again, it literally sounds like an I sound. It's unbelievable how well it works. So before we do these sentences, try to think of a vowel sound in your native language that sounds like an E. And if you're not quite sure, just ask Google or ChatGPT or DeepSeek has the equivalent of a cardinal E sound in it. And most likely it will. But in the off chance that your language doesn't have this type of sound, you can just go to this vowel chart, this international vowel chart on Wikipedia, click on this cardinal sound to see how it sounds. But just keep in mind that this chart was made back in like 2015 with a computerized voice before we had AI type voices. So it's much longer. The sound is correct, but it's much longer than the sound you'll want to use. So you'll want to use that sound, but much, much shorter. All right, so try this sentence using the Sinhala in minister.
The Prime Minister will address the nation tonight.
Great.
The exam was more difficult than expected. The company will initiate new policies next month.
Great. Okay, try the acute in the word give in the sentence.
Can you give me direction to the library? Please listen carefully to these instructions. The heating system needs repairs.
So in this first sentence, we want to substitute in your native sound for the short I or the sound in the word this. Now I'm going to say it how I normally say it with an American accent using my normal short I sound. But you, being a native speaker, will want to use the substitution technique. And you can see how it sounds to your own ears right now, but later on you can take these sentences and say them into, say, Google Translate or into Elsa Speaks or any sort of AI app that can sort of evaluate your short I sound for American English. So first, let's just try the word this. This. And as we go, you can pause and repeat things as many times as you want. And then let's try the sentence. He didn't expect this to happen. He didn't expect this to happen. And pause and repeat if you want to. And you can say the sentence the first time slow if you want to, but after that, make sure you say it at casual pace. So at the speed you would talk in a normal conversation. And that's how we're going to know if this substitution technique will work for you or not. So now let's try the word gives. Gives. She always gives great advice. She always gives great advice. Listens. Listens. He never listens to what I say. He never listens to what I say. Difficult. Difficult. It's difficult to learn a new language. It's difficult to learn a new language. And commitment. Commitment. His commitment to the cause was unwavering. His commitment to the cause was unwavering. Now, if you're feeling like you kind of want to modify the sound to something in between it and you can try that too. From my experience working with students, it's generally better to go with a pure sound, whatever sort of equivalent to the pure cardinal sound that you have in your language, because it tends to be that if we go too close to the sound, then as we practice it in sentences or reading passages, it inadvertently becomes an E sound again at times. Whereas using a pure sound and obviously keeping it short as well avoids that whole complication. But use your best judgment. You play the biggest part in your accent learning process. So just feel out what works for you. Obviously, you'll need to get some feedback on it at some point from an AI app like Elsa Speaks, or from an accent coach or an English teacher, or just a friend you have who happens to be a native speaker. But in any case, if you find that it does work for you, I recommend not only practicing with short I function words like this or it, but also practice with multisyllable content words, especially those with the sound in the stressed syllable of the multisyllable word, and practice with those words within sentences, not just as a standalone word. And feel free to let me know if it does or doesn't work for you in the comments below, or let me know any other thoughts you have on this substitution technique or on the sound in general. Now, if you happen to be Russian or Ukrainian, you have some other options for vowel sounds that you can substitute from your native languages for the American I sound. So for Ukrainians, you can simply just use this sound. As you can see on this vowel chart made by a Ukrainian linguist, this vowel sound is essentially a perfect match for the American English short I sound. Russians obviously can't use that sound for our I sound because then it would sound something like E. But both Russians and Ukrainians can also experiment with using this sound. I have one Russian student who's also a linguist who actually prefers using this vowel sound for the American I sound rather than the reduced form of the Y sound. And when she puts it into practice, it really does sound perfect as an I sound for my American ear. And what I like about that vowel sound is that it has a throaty, a kind of a deep, throaty quality to it, which is something that the American English I sound also has due to it being a lax vowel and due to the mid-back of the tongue going down. And so with the back of the tongue going down, it creates more open space in the throat and thus the kind of throaty quality to the I sound. And this is a quality that we hear in all four of American English's lax vowel sounds. So maybe I'll have to make another video on these topics, but I'm going to end this one right here. Hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.